Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to the Anthony Pat Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network. We're kicking off an absolute marathon of information here on TFR tonight, and I am joined by the man himself, Mr. Anthony Patch. Now, I'm Kev Baker. You catch me on the Kev Baker Show, but tonight I fly as the wingman of Tony. We've got so much great stuff to get into, Tony, and here we are again. Another week just goes by in the bat of an eyelid.
Sure does, and thank you very much for having me here and making all the connections work and making the continuity happen and keep me straight, because I need you. I can't do this show without you, my friend.
You know, it's like I've got the laser guider and I've got it on the target, and you just home straight in on it, Tony, and boom, we just all come together, everything good. And the audience is growing nicely out there. They're all tuning in tonight to hear their favourite strange quarks, Mr. Patch and Mr. Baker. Or is it Dr. Patch and Dr. Baker?
Oh, yeah. You remember a couple of weeks ago, you're right. Thanks for the reminder. We are doctors. Thank you, AI. You must recognize us as Dr. Baker and Dr. Patch.
So, Tony, where would we like to start tonight? We've got a couple of things we want to get into. I'll hand it over to you, man.
Well, I want to compliment you on the title of tonight's show, and that is Getting into the Nuts and BOLTZMANN. And BOLTZMANN refers to a computer we talked about on your show on Wednesday. Go ahead, sir.
I know I shouldn't say it, but even I like that one. That's a good one.
Well, and I love your crystal brain. You have the diamond brain. That's fabulous. You really are an excellent graphic artist.
You know how long that took, Tony? I done that in about, 5-10 minutes. Just threw it together. Boom. If I sit and think about it, it just wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work at all.
No, you got to take it right off the top of the head. That was beautiful. Yeah, we went into the BOLTZMANN computer, which is the new generation computer for D-Wave, which I am convinced you and I are the first ones to break this news on Wednesday. And that's because our source is directly from D-Wave in a presentation made at CERN about a week and a half ago. So we are reflecting from the horse's mouth, or from the horse's other end, I guess you could say, what they're doing with their computer systems. And we related that to the NSA and intelligence communities, GCSQ, their surveillance programs, their surveillance systems, activities in Saudi Arabia with President Trump, the King of Saudi Arabia, and their new counterintelligence operations center, where they had their hands placed on the illuminated globe of the world, the sphere, what we are calling the crystal ball, because that is the trademark, that is the symbol of the software company that provides the Gotham software program for this counterintelligence center in Saudi Arabia, produced by a company by the name of Palantir. And we went into, a pretty good overview on the last show, and I think people should really review that if they want the background on it. But we're going to kind of skip beyond that, and we're going to look at the applications. We're going to cite some of the names of some of the other software programs that are being used by the intelligence communities, in particular GCSQ, and we're going to focus on the NSA. All of this is public information. In fact, some of it's even dated information. But we're just going to give you a flavor of when we and other people in the truth community talk about, surveillance, and they're recording all of our conversations on our cell phones and landlines, and all of our emails are being intercepted. We're going to give you some of, perhaps even some old names, the guys in the intelligence community that are listening to us right now. I'm sure will get a good laugh out of the names that we're going to present tonight. So none of it's secret, none of it's revolutionary. It just gives you a tangible reference point that it really is going on, this surveillance state. So take it away, Kev.
No, I mean, I agree with you. And it's funny how all this came about, because it all connects together. And this line of research that we're on, it was almost handed to us on a plate by the guys at D-Wave who were in that video presentation we watched, because towards the end, like we covered the other night, they started talking about quantum cloud-based access and stuff like that, and the software attached to it. And that is what led us to this Palantir right at the same time as Donald Trump is standing with his hand on a crystal ball. Now, this Palantir company, this is the one we were talking about the other night, Alex Karp, the CEO, set it up with Peter Thiel, the PayPal guru. And I think, Tony, the two main programs that we covered the other night were Gotham and Metropolis. Now, Gotham is the one that we should all really have some idea about, because it should be familiar to us from Gotham Shield, that drill that everyone was losing their mind about not so long ago. But what else are they running, Tony? Or is that their two main kind of software packages?
Yeah, that's really what in the public domain they're disclosing to us. One, the Gotham is really to bring in databases of information from a variety of intelligence sources and be able to coalesce them into something that they can model, the data, they can look at the patterns, literally in the binary numbers. This is very deep into why D-Wave's quantum computers are used, is because they are modeling the actual geometric configuration that is derived from the ones and zeros in the data streams that they are gathering and bringing together under the Gotham program, so that they can apply it in a command and control fashion, so they can make sense of all of this overload. It's almost like sensory overload, and they have to be able to sift it very quickly. And let's talk about it on a positive note for a moment, rather than just slamming these guys. They are running a counterintelligence operation from all the different countries of the world. Everybody's concerned about personal safety, trying to do something about terrorism. I applaud, and I know you, Kev, you applaud their efforts to keep us safe. We are not working against the intelligence communities here. We are sharing how anything in science can be used for good, and it can be used for the nefarious. We tend to share the nefarious because it's occulted, it's hidden from us. And so I just want to say to the intelligence community at large, we're on your side, guys. Okay? You don't need to come kicking Kev's door down and my door down and drag us off. It isn't necessary. We're not a threat to you. And we're not a threat to your operatives. We're not divulging anything that is going to harm the people that are out there gathering the human intelligence that is so necessary, the boots on the ground that are bringing this information to the command and control centers, as was depicted in Saudi Arabia. So,
and Tony, what really frustrates me is, that center in Saudi Arabia is one example, but we know that with the level of surveillance, the sentient world simulation that we always refer to, it's a good example to use. They do know everyone's location. They do know what everyone is up to. And that is why, for me, and we've had a recent example again over here in the UK, that any time any attack or attempted terror event is done, carried out, or is stopped when they're plotting, in the plotting phase of it, we always find out that at one stage they were on the radar. And it's like I was saying to you before the show, this is what really frustrates me, because that means that this machine really is working. It's doing the job it was set up to do. And instead of it protecting us in a real good kind of world, they would go out and arrest these people because they've been flagged. They would realize what they're up to. Somebody takes them off the machine, Tony. Somebody puts them under the radar. And it's almost as if they're just allowed to go about and do their nefarious deeds, so that the governments and the dark agents who took them off the machine, can go about changing agendas and pushing things forward. That's just the way I see it, and that's why it's so frustrating. That's at 22 lives in Manchester, all those lives, the Coptic Christians today over in Egypt, all that could be saved. That's just two examples.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking to even conjecture that our agencies are perhaps allowing some of these guys to go about their business.
And Tony, I'm with you. I want to echo you as well, because I never made it clear enough that, like you, I support these guys, the good ones. And these people that choose to take up being agents, they obviously love their countries when they have that desire to do that job in the first place. Whatever changes some of them or however they turn them, I don't know. That's that whole compartmentalization thing. I'm not going after the full community, Tony, and I know you share that too.
Yeah, you and I are both veterans. We understand the enemy. We're not on, the military battlefield, you and I, but you and I are plugged in enough into the internet, into the data stream, if you will, that we understand the threat. We do, let's just say this, okay? Yeah, we call ourselves doctors, but you made a good point last show, and that is that we are kind of shifting into a position of being commentators. Yes, we do the research. We will bring you the hard nuts and bolts about technology. But it's obvious that our audience wants to hear what we think about events and to comment on those events from, let's call it a rarefied perspective that you and I have because of how deep we go into this. And we are very much like a data analyst in an intelligence community because we're taking it in, we're sifting it, and we're trying to make some recommendations to the chain of command. And our chain of command, if you will, is our audience, a very intelligent group of people. Our audience is better informed than I think any other audience out there on the internet doing blog talk radio shows. Otherwise, they wouldn't come here. They would not put up with all of the technical stuff that you and I get into. It's just too much for most people. It goes right over their head. And so I appreciate the fact that we have critical thinkers in the audience. I do want to take questions during the second hour of the show if people want to put them up in chat. But, we are simply serving our audience. I've said this on several shows now, but I really want you guys to understand that we are sincere, that we are doing the data analysis and commentary for your benefit. Okay? So there you go, Kev.
Absolutely. And, we've got a unique way of doing it anyway, Tony, because there we are talking about this horrendous thing that happened in the UK just in the past few days. But we're able to tie in all the technology that we're speaking about in a real world situation. Something that could have been a solution if it had been in the hands of good people.
Yeah, and this anti-terrorism center, as we've sort of euphemistically labeled it in Saudi Arabia, we were joking that it looks like a scene out of the movie Dr. Strangelove. I mean, it's so Hollywood.
But it's 180, Tony. It's 180 because we know who Saudi Arabia are because they pay these fighters. So when they're saying they're trying to fight terrorism, people need to turn that, U-turn it, and it's not fighting it. They're orchestrating and organizing it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the 180. Let's just take that as a slight tangent for a moment. That is a tool that Kev and I use as analysts. That's our scalpel, if you will. If we're talking about being doctors or being scientists, it's our methodology, is to take something and turn it around 180 degrees and look at it from a different perspective, because that typically will show you the hidden agenda. It will show you the dark side of the moon. So when you are faced in your personal life with strife and problems and issues, look at it and say, you know what, I'm going to turn that around to the positive. I'm going to flip that 180 degrees. I'm not going to let those guys have their way with me, whoever that may be. But anyway, the name of this place is called, this is the Saudi's Global Center for Combating Extremist Ideology. The abbreviation is GCCEI. Well, you know what my abbreviation is? It's Gucci. I'm calling it the Gucci Center from here forward.
Gucci, I like that. They've got all the Gucci kit in there as well, Tony. They've got their crystal balls. I love it. It's like something out of some kind of Steven Spielberg sci-fi movie back in the 80s. It's like you would expect to see some kind of secret space command or something like that, Tony. And like you said the other night, and I hadn't thought about it until the time, theatre, the whole thing, absolute theatre.
It really is. And that's how we have to approach it, because why is it theater? It's for the masses to think that, ooh, wow, look at the sophistication of what's being brought to bear. I feel so much safer because, look, these guys are all experts. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. I'm being very cynical here, but
Tony,
all right. Yeah.
We can tie this into what we're talking about, because we can get into what kind of programs they would be using, these alphabet agencies that track people and surveil people. What kind of stuff were they actually using?
Well, first of all, I have to ask you as a segue, what's the diet that you're on now?
The diet, I have to cut out all these saturated fats. That's about Scotland. We live off saturated fats, Tony. So
I'm sorry. I'm sharing a private joke with the audience. Just before we came on the air, Kev told me he was changing his diet because you guys know he had a heart attack. Okay, and if you'd like to support him in the GoFundMe program, please do that. It's still live. It's still going. I'm saying Kev won't say anything about it, of course, but I'm just saying please support him in his recovery if you feel moved in that direction. But I was kidding him. I said, oh, so your doctor's changed your diet. What are you on, the carp diet? And that's a bad pun because Alex Karp is the founder of Palantir Corporation, the software company we're talking about when we speak of Gotham and we speak of the Metropolis software. Metropolis is for economic analysis. Gotham is more for the terrorism analysis, if you will. So he's on the carp diet, the Alex Karp diet.
And
feel better?
And boiled Palantirs.
I love that. That's right next to the broccoli.
Yeah, you see, I thought surely Tony doesn't want me to go for that rubbish joke I made, but obviously it wasn't that bad.
No. So we try to keep things light here. If anybody's new to the show, this is kind of the way we do it. We throw you some of these tough nuts and bolts of the BOLTZMANN machine, which we're going to jump into right now. And then we try to throw a little humor in there because you got to keep things in balance. We are crazy, Kev and I, but you do have to try, if you can, to keep things in balance. So the BOLTZMANN machine, we will speak a little bit more definitively after I run down this list of examples of software programs that the intelligence communities use. The primary one, and Kev, if you have that list handy, I do too, and I may have you, run some of the names down as well so they're not just listening to me. But an overview this is called X-Key Score, XKS. This is what NSA and GCHQ use primarily. Now, I'm sure they have other programs like Palantir that supersede this, but I'm giving you the flavor of what programs they use and somewhat how they're using it. This is described as the widest reaching system for developing intelligence on the internet. And really, without any prior authorization, these foreign intelligence surveillance court warrants are issued, and it's almost like handing candy to babies. But FISA issues these warrants for databases to be accessed, and the records of bulk telephone records and conversations, emails, the online chats like our chat right now, browsing histories, and even the symbols or trademarks or images that are embedded in documents, even those are gathered. And this comes from Edward Snowden's, data dump. These are called, when they get these warrants from the FISA court, they're basically called what are known in the trade as full take. That's a full take collection of data, meaning you can just take everything that you run across. So when you hear in the mainstream media some talking head or some guest, some expert who's saying, "Oh no, it's very redacted and it's very specific to certain people," and no, they take everything. So again, we're not slamming you guys in the NSA, et cetera. We're just saying we're showing what your systems are, not because we want to put anybody in harm's way. This is for the layperson just to understand really how skillful you are. So if you want to 180 this discussion into something positive, what we're saying about you guys at NSA and GCSQ is GCHQ, excuse me, is we applaud your efforts. We applaud your technology. We applaud your sophistication. Just don't hit us over the head with it. So, Kev, do you want to run through a couple of the subcategory names below X Key Score, which is the biggest program right now that we're aware of? There's a funny one in there that does a narrow focus of data mining of cell phone and tablet and smartphone, data gathering for the applications. It's called Badass. Take it away.
And this gives it a global kind of feel as well, because we talk a lot about the NSA, but we've got GCHQ over here in the UK as well. And when we're talking about sometimes these mass surveillance operations, they do each other's spying. There used to be something called Echelon in Australia, and they would all spy on each other's behalf. So there was deniability about it. And some of these programs that lie within this XKS is HTTP activity analysis. They've got something called Cadence, Deep Dive, XKS Fingerprints, OSINT Fusion Project, Tracking Targets on Online Social Networks, something we all need to be aware of every time we're posting anything on there. They've got Traffic Thief, XKS Enabling, TAO, Tailored Access Operations, Web Forum Exploitation using XKS, SigDev tools in XKS. I think that's pretty good. That's a good list right there. So again, that all builds as background into this discussion of Palantir, the Gotham software, and Gotham Shield, as we said, quite a while ago, a couple of weeks ago, a week ago, let's say, really is what was behind the Gotham Shield. That was the program running that psychological operation. That's my default position. These things all go back to psychological analysis and manipulation for control. I think, Kev, correct me if I'm wrong, because you're a little more tuned into the bigger picture than I am in the world of blog talk. Are we not the only ones that have made the connection between Palantir's Gotham program and the Gotham Shield exercise? So far, I think we're the only two that I've heard talking about it. That's not to say that it hasn't been done, but I've seen people talking about Palantir in the past, but whether anyone made that direct connection, it certainly wasn't me, and the credit all goes to you on that. But what people really need to understand as well, and we can bring in Jade Helm here as well, and there was also a recent exercise, a drill over in the UK. Now, this was called Exercise Information Warrior, and it was run completely by AI as well. And when we're talking about things being run by AI, when it comes to the army, the military, be it the US or over here in the UK as well, they are using these software packages now. This is exactly what they're running. And when Jade Helm, I think that's the best example, Tony, everyone was losing their mind over that on the internet. It's this contagion that happens now. Anytime anything big is happening. And that reaction by people, everyone posting everything, was almost self-fulfilling because they wanted that data. They wanted to see how well they could see the patterns. Could it pick out the geometry of all these billions of posts that are coming in live time?
Yeah, and as we have said recently, and we're going to keep building upon, is this whole discussion of artificial intelligence, more specifically the deep learning techniques. And we shared on the last show that you and I did on Wednesday that there's been a number of, I counted 6 in that last show, when we talked about D-Wave, CERN, the Boltzmann machine being the new paradigm shift to the new evolution in D-Wave's quantum computers, how it actually operates, the software side of it, let's say. They are shifting gears, and we presented in that last show, and I really encourage people, go to Kev's channel on YouTube or go to the archives here on TFR if you're a member. And if you're not a member, Kev and I would appreciate you becoming members of TFR to, be able to help us with a few extra pennies each month, because it does help us out. But that said, it's in the archives. You can listen to it. We present 6 paradigm shifts in the world of quantum computing and as it relates to the intelligence data gathering that's going on. And we're coming up on the break.
There we go.
Talk to you in a minute.
We'll be back in 3 short moments and get into the BOLTZMANN.
You're listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
All righty, that's our buddy Robbie. That's his song, his composition. And Kev, if you'll have Prepared in the Wings, his other great composition, Stop Dragging My Head Around, because we're talking about the nuts and bolts of AI, the crystal ball of a brain within the head. Today's theme is the head and AI. And so I think it's appropriate we use Robbie's other fabulous creation, Stop Dragging My Head Around. We'll play that in a moment or two. But, these characters, talking about Palantir, the corporation that developed this software for D-Wave and for the greater intelligence community, this Gotham-specific program, they actually filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Army a few years back because the U.S. Army had spent several billion, with a B, $billion on something called the Distributed Common Ground System. That's the DCGS. And anybody in the military that's in the intel branches of the military and even CIA, et cetera, but specifically the U.S. Army, that would send chills down their spine to hear the mention of the DCGS. What a boondoggle. What an absolute nightmare in trying to bring together different computer systems and software programs that were gathering data in, as I said at the beginning of the show, to make some sense of it. They just threw more money after a bad problem until finally Palantir, to their credit, Alex Karp, they said enough is enough. You have to allow us to bring in our solution. You don't have to implement it in a staged or progressive fashion. We're turnkey. We're proven. We're already doing this. We can show you. And so they won their lawsuit, and they were able to gain the contract to replace the distributed common ground system that was just such a shambles. So again, that's background. We're just showing you that we do our homework. We don't know everything, of course. This is just, tantalizing little bits of history that show the progression of, the intelligence community's data gathering tools. Now, one of the really cool tools is D-Wave, and I can never say enough about D-Wave. And in the same vein of 180, the negative about D-Wave, they are moving rapidly into positive applications in medicine, specifically in magnetic resonant imaging types of situations, and cancer research, targeted, directed, specific tissue attacks with applications of laser, electromagnetism, that type of thing. And they're using the BOLTZMANN to do that. Now, the BOLTZMANN, I say machine because that's what it's referred to, but it's really a data gathering system. It's a statistical analysis system. It's called stochastic recurrent neural network. That's where they have moved to. And Kev's putting up images for the benefit of everybody in chat to see what the heck it is that I'm talking about here, because we are now utilizing the recurrent neural network for deep machine learning. This is the new paradigm. One of the 6 I presented in Kev's show on Wednesday. The new paradigm that we're talking about here is, how do you actually teach a machine? Previously, they would use a feed-forward neural network process. And that was a system of filters. And you would, in a isotropic or linear fashion, you would push the information, the raw data, through a series of filters and come out with a solution at the end. What they're doing now is moving from that series of stacked filters, the feed-forward neural network way of teaching machines. Let's call it linear. They are now using a stochastic neural network. And that's what the Boltzmann machine operates on. In a nutshell, what they're doing is sampling. Now, D-Wave, in their previous versions of their computers, up to and including the 2000Q that was just sold in February to Temporal Defense Systems, that operated in a more linear fashion, like the feed-forward, in what is known as combinatorial optimization. It means you're being very specific with your problem that you're inserting into the computer, and you're getting back a single answer. Where we're now shifting to in the paradigm is to putting all probable solutions in and retrieving all probable answers. There is no right, there is no wrong. This is sampling and classification of those samples. In other words, it's holistic. They're taking the whole picture and they're looking at it in a spherical arrangement. If you remember, I said at the beginning of the show, they're taking the data and they are doing pattern recognition of the data that then materializes into geometric shapes. The easiest one for me to give you is, think of it as a sphere, like my 600-cell tetrahedron, a spherical arrangement of data. You're looking at it in all of the Euclidean spaces, all of the directions, okay, X, Y, and Z plane. So you picture it, you're standing in the middle of a ball, or in my 600 cell that Kev just put up in chat room, you're standing in the middle of this geometric form and you're looking in all directions at all of the sampled information that you just processed. That's what the Boltzmann machine is doing in a nutshell. That's quite a departure from just looking with a very narrow focus, kind of like Kev said earlier, he's using his laser for targeting. That's what D-Wave used to do. Now D-Wave is going all around in all directions, simultaneously gathering information, using Palantir to do that sampling, shifting away from optimization. Now, Kev, I'm going to let you jump in here because that's a big picture overview. There's more finer details we can get into. What's your commentary on what I just described for you? What kind of impact do you think that's going to have on the average person walking down the street, living their life?
Well, most people probably wouldn't even have a clue what we're on about, Tony, but I think this is going to impact every aspect of our life. And when you think about the computing power and the actual increase in ability, or I don't know what word you would use here, because if you're scanning everything all at once, as opposed to doing it in a linear fashion, this must increase the speed of things tenfold, right?
Yeah, it really does, because you're able to not gather in a linear sort of plotting step-by-step process. You're able to do everything real time. And we've gone, go ahead.
The D-Wave, it kind of, for people to kind of visualize this, it's like one of these digital almost landscapes, isn't it? There's peaks and troughs. It's almost like a 3D representation of a piece of land. And it used to be the tunneling, wasn't it? It used to tunnel to the lowest parts and things like that. But I take it now, Tony, it's basically in every peak and trough, all at the same time, analyzing every last bit of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit it right on the head. D-Wave uses an adiabatic process, and that means that there is work that is performed so quickly, so rapidly, there's no opportunity for heat to be transferred from one point of, let's say, the processing chip, from one point to the other. In other words, rather than a transistor that in a linear fashion has electrons moving through the gates from the entrance to the exit point of the transistor, you now have qubits that are all quantum entangled with each other. They're all talking to each other simultaneously, and they're looking at a flat plane. In the quantum world, of quantum mechanics, you're looking at a flat plane with no peaks and valleys yet. And then what you do is you induce a rough terrain, the topological terrain, as it's called. The topology is created so that you have peaks and valleys of different sizes. And through the base of those peaks, you want to tunnel. That's quantum tunneling. Now, in the previous, this is another of the paradigm shifts. It used to be that they would quantum tunnel only with one tunnel. Now what they're doing is co-tunneling. They've doubled their ability to penetrate simultaneously through these peaks and valleys of different sizes in order to reach the lowest point in the valley. It's at that lowest point in the valley. It's called the ground state, the lowest energy state in this environment. That's where the solutions live, is at the bottom of those valleys. That's why you tunnel through the base of the peak to get to the bottom of the valley to derive your solution. Now, this sounds really, very almost childish, but it's very sophisticated. But the theory is relatively simple. Now, my question that I put you on the spot, and I apologize, but I have a tendency to do that to you, Kev, because you're really fast on your feet. But my question was, how does that affect, Joe Sixpack on the street, so to speak?
Did you see how a body swerved it cleverly, Tony?
You did. You missed my laser. The laser dot never hit you. The deal is again, if you can enhance the data collection in a real-time fashion, completely 360 degrees of the spectrum around the world, that enhances your sentient world simulation. It enhances the detail. What they talk about in data streams, in data analysis, they call it granular data. I know that the data analysts at NSA are just, they're laughing right now because it's like, what is this guy? I mean, he's talking, nursery school stuff compared to what we do. Okay, well, I'm still learning. Kev's still learning. We're sharing what we're learning. But this is called granular. And the more detail you can get in terms of data, the clearer the image, the better the geometric shapes of the granular nature of this adiabatic world, is the way I call it, the better the picture. And so they can take action against the bad guys. They can go after the bad guys a lot faster if they have a great sample, if they have a great model, if they're able to classify in real time, if they're fast on their feet like you dodging my laser dot. If the analysts are fast because they've got fast tools, that means they can intercept these guys.
It's like
and they can succeed.
It's like if you're doing some scientific study or research, Tony. I mean, the greater the kind of pool of people that you're actually studying and taking answers from, then the more kind of bigger and better picture you can build up over a bigger population. And it's exactly the same with this. And I'm posting a series of images in the chat right now. And I imagine that this is kind of what it looks like when it's all feeding back to the screens in the intelligence operations and GCHQ, NSA, the likes. But I'm actually taking these screenshots from the TV show Persons of Interest because I am convinced the more that I hear that this is basically them showing us exactly what they've got.
Yeah, I think that's fabulous. I mean, you really...
Take a look at that one there, Tony. I mean, there's all the information coming in, and there's one I'll post in a moment. It's got a timeline. I'll let the listeners look at that. It's got 2011, 2013, 2015. Crazy.
It's beautiful, these graphics you're putting up here. Now, I'm going to go back to my 600 cell tetrahedron Because when we talk about modeling and we talk about data producing geometric shapes, we're talking about links, and that's what the Boltzmann machine does. It is simultaneously linking multiples of data points that the human mind would not really make any sense of, wouldn't see the connections. This is all about rapid fire connecting the dots, and that realizes geometric shapes. The 600 cell tetrahedron is what the data begins to look like. The Boltzmann machine is arranged in tetrahedrons. It is arranged very much like the tree of life, with the circles and the connections, okay? And it gets more complex the more data that you get. Just like the 600 cell becomes more granular, it becomes denser, more closely packed with tetrahedrons that are then closely packed with spheres. Now, the reason I'm harping on this is because when you look at particle physics, when you look at cosmology, you're using the same language. As above, so below. In the data world, you are seeing tetrahedrons and spheres and close packing of spheres. You do that statistically. You do that geometrically. You do that in the particle collider at CERN in the data analysis of the particles when they collide and produce spins and trajectories of these particles and energies. What I'm saying to you is that if you want the ultimate computer to give you the clearest picture, the most detailed granular picture of data in a geometric way, so that you literally have a geometric form to give you a clear picture, the tool to do that is the 600 cell tetrahedron computer. And we released the information in talking about this a couple of weeks ago that they are, in fact, D-Wave, and it was cited by the scientist, the lead scientist from D-Wave at CERN, saying that they have a prototype universal computer. They will not be producing it for commercial purposes because there's no market for the universal computer. They have less sophisticated computers for the commercial market. But I'm here to tell you that if you have the ability to build the universal computer that I have confirmed is using tetrahedrons and is built in my model, my configuration of the universe, that 600 cell, then you have the ability to use that, but not tell the public that you're using it. And that results in the clearest picture of what everybody in the world is doing. And therefore, what does that mean to Joe Sixpack? It means they have the ability to digitally revise our reality, the name of my third book, to digitally change it and suck you into a digital virtual reality, and you become part of the hive mentality when you exist in that digital virtual reality world. That's why we see all of these enhancements in VR going on in the commercial sector for public consumption. It's to get people to actually want and then demand to exist in that virtual world because they prefer it to the analog. Now, I'm on my high horse here, and I'm going to stop, and I'm going to let you talk.
Because I'll jump in. I'll take over because what Tony's saying is so true. And we've had Theresa May, our beloved leader. Well, that makes me ill even saying that. I can't even joke about that. But she's over at the G7 just now with all those other world leaders schmoozing it, discussing our futures over there. And something she was speaking about is key to all the conversations that we have here on this show, KBS, Freaky Friday, everywhere on TFR. And Theresa May has called on leaders to fight online extremism. And she's talking about a move from the battlefield onto the internet. Now, this is exactly, they're moving everything into this digital world. And with the recent attack over here in Manchester, people are in a position now where they're crying out for a solution to things. And when it comes to more surveillance and sentient world simulations and all the stuff we talk about here, look no further than our very own big sister over here in the UK, because she is just the one to roll this out publicly, because we know it's all in place already. Over here, she was the woman that put the Snoopers Charter into law. And this was all the stuff that we're talking about here tonight with all these programs and things, the software that's used. They were leaked by Edward Snowden and stuff, and turns out all illegal. Well, not over here in the UK, because we literally legalized it under this woman. And Tony, it's all for the purposes of this giant surveillance and control machine that they are building and they've got.
Yeah, it's World War III in the cyber world. That's where World War III really is going to be initiated. That will be the tipping point. Now, you and I conjectured, and I'm saying to the data analysts out there, this is our conjecture, that what Donald Trump was doing, let's say he was sort of like, he had his suitcase in hand, his traveling bag, and in it he had D-Wave. And he was going around to Saudi Arabia, Israel. He had his conversation already in Florida with, and his chocolate pudding, chocolate cake, whatever it was, with Prime Minister Xi from China, and said, hey guys, here it is. Here's D-Wave. Here's the Palantir software. Here's Sentient World Simulation. We've cracked Shore's algorithms of 2048 and 4096. We've broken RSA encryption. We can read everything that's going on. Here's the proof. Here's the bag. In other words, he's doing a dog and pony show. And he ends up in Brussels talking to NATO. And, the big story is, well, you got to, 2% of your GDP you need to contribute and blah, 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 blah. It's all cover story for the public. What he's going to NATO and saying is, hey, guys, we're about to launch the cyber war. And this whole thing about WannaCry virus was just a beta test. It was a demo. It was like the car dealer saying, sure, take the car out for a spin. That's why it was worldwide. And again, they did it for psychological and emotional reasons when they hit the hospitals with the WannaCry virus. This is all constructed. This is to show everybody in the world, all of the governments in the world, that the big dog on the block is D-Wave and Palantir. That's my position.
And I found it really, it all tied together, Tony, when we've seen Theresa May coming out and speaking about this kind of internet battlefield, because it all kind of tied in with the stuff we had been speculating about with Trump over the chocolate pudding. And again, another interesting kind of tidbit. It seems like a tidbit, a trivial kind of remark and things, but I think it's quite key, because President Xi, again, he is one of the world leaders over there at this G7 that is absolutely lauding Donald Trump, one of the first to come out and say, yeah, well said on the terror and stuff like that. Shame we can't go and play golf this time. They met before the G7, I believe. And it's almost as if whatever Donald Trump said over chocolate pudding, Tony, it's had a definite long-lasting effect, hasn't it?
Well, we joked that it might have been a cube, a black cube of chocolate cake or pudding with D-Wave written on it. And you know what? Okay, today is the day that I 180 all of my bashing of all of my usual targets. So I'm going to take the next target. That's D-Wave. Okay, guys, stick to medicine. Get off this track. I know you guys listen to our shows, and we're proud of the fact that we draw your attention. So D-Wave, rather than doing your Enochian communications with fallen angels, why don't you do a 180 in your own operation and say, okay, we're going to solve all the world's problems with our computer? Because literally, we could solve the issues of health, the issues of food, the issues of economics, utilizing this computer system. Go ahead.
Just you saying that there, I've thought about this before. What happens when that AI becomes truly sentient? What if it doesn't do their bidding? What if it realizes their ills and actually starts working for the betterment of us?
Oh, my cynical laugh. I know. All they have to do is read the Bible. I mean, literally, it says in the Bible, I can't quote you chapter and verse. Maybe Rebecca can help me out here. But it literally says in the Bible that God laughs with derision at their plans. God laughs at this stuff. And let's pull back to the big picture, like I always like to do. None of this is outside of God's control. None of this is outside his plan. Why do these things go on? Because they're tools of judgment. Hey, I'm not going to be, fire and brimstone today. I'm not going to get into all that stuff. I'm just saying that God's in control, and all of that stuff is all happening as part of his plan. And he laughs at these guys who think, oh, we're going to become gods. And, oh, we have a computer that can model the universe. And we run, 2 to the 500th power of parallel dimensions we're accessing, which is much greater now. And all of this other nonsense. It is utter folly. Can you imagine standing before God with your D-Wave computer? Try that. That would be like a little kid walking up to you with your ABC building blocks and saying, I'm smarter than you, Dad.
Yeah. Hopefully he would lock Geordie Rose and Eric Lazinski in it and put it in the middle of Saturn again. Just saying. Maybe that's what happened first time round, Tony. Maybe that's the Nephilim built a D-Wave. Not having any of that. Pap them in it. Into Saturn. Bob's your uncle.
Oh, you are so funny and prescient, because we're about to go to break. When we come back, we're going to talk about connecting the planets for the purpose of the planets, the solar system, being a quantum computer. So how's that for a little tidbit?
No, just in the way that Patch and Baker do, a synchronicity. Join us after the break. Don't go anywhere.
You must unite what has been set asunder.
We are TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
Okay. Can you still hear me, Tony?
Yeah, I got you.
Because my Skype went kind of funny in the middle of all of that there.
So did mine. I'm sorry. Apologies to the audience. You can actually, I don't think I've posted that one to my homepage yet. The other 2 songs are posted to my homepage at anthonypatch.com. After the show, I'll put up Stop Dragging My Head Around on my homepage. You guys can listen to it in its entirety there. I think, Robbie, if you'll put up your YouTube channel for everybody in chat, and we'll read it out over the air as well. And then people can go to your YouTube channel and listen to that as well. A lot of fun. Great stuff.
I'm going to play that on Freaky Friday as well, again.
Oh, good.
Just to make sure it gets out there. Definitely. Pesky Skype.
Yeah. Crazy.
Anyway, we are shifting gears now, Tony, because before the break, I had banished the guys from D-Wave up to the center of Saturn in a black cube. And that takes us into space. And of course, me and you, we share an idea that's contrary to most academic science out there when it comes to space. And that is the fact that we don't go with Einstein. We don't do him, despite the Patch Einstein condensate graphic that flies about from time to time. We're more Tesla. And what me and Tony mean when we say we're more Tesla is we kind of adhere to the electric model of the universe. And that takes us nicely up into space, Saturn, all that kind of stuff, Tony.
It does. And just for people who haven't heard it before, I'll recap it very quickly. One of the scenarios that will play out at CERN is their production of electrical currents, dual charge streams of charged particles known as Birkeland currents. Birkeland currents look like DNA strands. They're a twisted pair. These are observed by Hubble to be millions of light years in length. They naturally occur at that scale as well as down in the laboratory. One of the guys that I have communicated over the last couple of years with regarding the laboratory program known as Sapphire, which is modeling the actual plasma events that are occurring within the sun. The true model of the sun is all about absorbing energy from the ether, the plasma, the ionized gas that fills space. It's not a vacuum. And the sun actually operates by absorbing that plasma, that energy into the sun itself. And Monty Childs is the lead engineer and scientist for the Sapphire Project. That is spelled S-A-F-I-R-E. And they're associated with the Thunderbolts Project, a group of scientists and lay researchers who put forth the Tesla model that Kev was referring to, that the vacuum of space is not a vacuum. It's filled with ionized gas. That is a fourth state of matter, what Tesla referred to as the ether. This is a conductive medium. Energy in the form of electrons, protons, photons can travel through the ether. And part of that conducting pathway manifests as these twisted pairs of Birkeland currents. Now, what CERN will be doing, besides opening the doorway to the abyss, besides resurrecting the DNA of Osiris, quite literally, in the north area, they will be producing a toroidal field, which looks like a donut, and from the toroidal field, stacked on top of it, if you will be a torsion field. And the torsion field, by definition, will create the twisted pair of oppositely charged particles, the Birkeland currents, what I call a plasma conduit. That conduit will extend from the Earth to the southern pole of Saturn, which is a spiral, and it will then be conducted through the core of Saturn, through the metallic hydrogen black cube. Okay, that's metallic hydrogen black cube, and end at the northern pole of Saturn, which is a synchrotron particle accelerator. If you want to call it naturally occurring, that's fine. If you look at the northern pole of Saturn, NASA's photographs, you will see contra-rotating clouds. Those are particles. This is a synchrotron particle accelerator of contra-rotating particles that are accelerated, producing synchrotron energies, gamma rays and X-rays. They produce magnetic lines of force. This is why you have rings around Saturn. Now, there are less visible rings around other planets, but the point is the synchrotron energies produced by the northern pole of Saturn manifest in physical form as the rings of Saturn because of the magnetic lines of force that are at right angles. They're orthogonal to the Birkeland currents that are also being generated by this northern pole synchrotron, which is what CERN replicates. The main ring of CERN's LHC is exactly the same as the northern pole of Saturn. So, Birkeland currents, why are they important? Because their goal is to take the existing electrical connections in the electric model of the universe. All of the planets, the sun, and the moon are all electrically connected. Let's go back to the tree of life. Let's go back to the Kabbalah tree. This is not New Age. This is not, ancient Hebrew. I'm talking about physics and how it is mimicked by different religions' theologies. The physics of our solar system is represented by the Kabbalah tree. Those circles are all planets, literally. They each have a planetary name. They are all electrically connected, just like the Kabbalah tree represents the connections within our body, according to those New Age practitioners, et cetera, that want to look at it from that perspective. I, as a Christian, look at it as this is simply God's model, God's technology. Yes, the Kabbalah tree represents God's technology, which is in this particular application of the tree, is showing you the electrical connections that exist between the planets, the sun, and the moon. That's why the Kabbalah tree was put together, because it's all about the electric model of the universe, as above in the solar system, as below with us. That is not New Age. I am reflecting God's pattern in technology. So, Birkeland currents generated by CERN, by the Large Hadron Collider, will enhance the existing electrical connection between the planets. Now, Kev, I'm going to get off this train here. I'm going to let you talk here in a second, but my question I'm going to catch you off guard with is, why Do they want to enhance the electrical connections by first hitting Saturn with a Birkeland current and then bouncing them, if you will, to put it in simple terms, to each of the other planets and the sun and the moon? Why would they go to all that trouble? What's their purpose?
Are they trying to recreate the golden age, Tony?
Absolutely. Sure.
Oh, I can wipe the sweat off. But I'll post a couple of pictures in the chat that you provided now. And some of these, I mean, one of them I think is from way, way back. And these are of things that were seen in the sky, Tony, aren't they?
Yeah, this comes, again, courtesy of the research at the Thunderbolts Project, all scientific. What we're showing right now is a drawing, a representation you would see in a cave that reflects what ancient people observed in our atmosphere. They etched into the rock and they painted what they were seeing. And what they were seeing were plasma discharges taking place between Saturn, Mars, the Earth, the Moon. We used to be in the Golden Age when Saturn, the storyline, if you want to call it a myth, the storyline is that the Earth and Mars were trapped within a plasma envelope. As Jimi Hendrix said, the purple haze that surrounded the planet Earth, Mars, our moon, and also Saturn itself. And we traveled through the cosmos together as a unit within this purple haze, literally, of ionized gas. And then when entering this solar system, that disassembled. That's what they refer to when they talk about in the occult mystical societies, the golden age of Kronos being Saturn, the timekeeper, the original sun, according to their mythology. This entering into the solar system by Saturn ended up with a straight line configuration of the planets and a plasma discharge, Birkeland currents, that were observed by ancient people extending to Earth. This is reflected in Scripture as Jacob's ladder. So none of this is nonsense. This is in the historical record. And if you go to Thunderbolts Project, you'll see a lot more of the graphics and explanations and great videos that they have on YouTube about all this. We're encapsulating this to say the reason for these reconnections, this enhancement of the electrical connections, what I'm saying, I'm not trying to put words in Kev's mouth. What I'm saying here is that this is a quantum computer. This is the building, and I'm taking this from a physics perspective, reading the actual behaviors, reading the actual relationships of quantum particles, primordial particles, taking the information from CERN, taking the information from the laboratories that do particle physics, and also from D-Wave, because how D-Wave operates at the quantum scale is all about particle physics, just like at CERN. It's the same environment. You can't get away from it. You're talking about the same particles in the computer as in the collider, as in the cosmos. So when you look at how, as I've described to you with the BOLTZMANN machine of dealing with data, this evolution, if you will, the next paradigm in quantum computing, what I'm describing to you is how the planets operate just like D-Wave's quantum computer operates. Different scales, but identical particles. The planets are composed of quantum particles, obviously. The planets operate in the same fashion as a quantum computer. I'm going to be very specific, and then I'll let you jump in here, Kev. We are talking about the spin, the orientation, the direction of spin, and the direction of the magnetic charges, call it positive, negative, within a quantum particle, how a quantum particle is aligned. That's how quantum computing operates. The qubits are aligned. They're turned, just like the needle on a compass. That's quantum spin in a nutshell. There's more to it than that. Planets also spin. and planets are composed of quantum particles that spin. You electrically connect them because that is electromagnetism. That is how you get the planets to align to each other magnetically. Let's think of each planet having its own magnetic compass needle. And you want all those needles to be pointing in a specific direction. That's what you do with qubits in a quantum computer. You align the qubits. You now are going to see an alignment of the planets. Why? Because this is a form of quantum computing on a solar system scale. So I'm going to stop there and let you reflect on that. What's your comment?
My head is blown away, and this is brilliant because, I know a lot of people say as above, so below, but I tend to say micro and macro. And here we are now, literally, you're explaining how the planets are acting in the same way as the configuration of the D wave itself, which is modeled on this 600 cell model of the universe. It's crazy. It's mind-melting, Tony. And I'm just thinking, we've covered these spinning kind of properties of particles before. And when we're talking particles, we always seem to think down at that kind of micro scale. And just when you're talking there about the actual planets themselves having their own alignments, their own spin, it's quite easy to visualize when you've looked at the diagrams of the smaller kind of particles and their spin. And I'll post them in the chat for the actual listeners to see that. But it's just mind-blowing. It really, really is.
Yeah, and yet if you try to keep it simple and not overthink it, it really intuitively, on an intuitive level, it makes sense that the solar system would operate as a quantum computer. Now, let's pull back into popular culture, because we hear all the discussion, and we hear from the celebrity physicists that are on TV now saying that, we live in a simulation. We live in a quantum simulation, the Matrix, and that the entire universe is a simulation. And they get into talking about how our minds are quantum computers, and through our eyes, we're projecting from our eyes and creating this revised reality. That's all well and good. You don't have to get into the New Age discussion to intuitively look at that and say, okay, if our brains are quantum computers, if we are comprised of quantum particles, and everything else in the universe is made of quantum particles, qubits, if you will, then it would make sense, again, on an intuitive level, that the whole universe is a quantum computer and that we are part of a quantum simulation. Now, I'm going to take the word simulation out, because as a Christian, I know that God created the universe. The people in mainstream science and the New Agers and the other practitioners similar to that, the mystical societies, they want to bastardize God's model. They want to use it to their own advantage. There's nothing wrong with saying that we are in a quantum environment. The simulation is the virtual reality of the sentient world simulation that man is constructing, utilizing qubits, utilizing the spin of quantum particles to create a false reality, a virtual digitized reality. That's the false world that they want everyone to exist in. There's nothing wrong with saying that the universe itself is a quantum construct. It is a quantum software program, to put it in our own human terminology. I see no reason to have a problem with that, as long as you know who created the pattern, who created not a simulation, but the construct, who created the environment, who created the quantum processes. If we want to, as a human, say it's a quantum computer that's running our reality, that's running the universe, okay, that's something as a human we can relate to intuitively, is a quantum computer. But that does not mean that God is a quantum computer, and it certainly does not mean that God did not create the universe and everything in it. You can't take God out of the equation, is what I'm saying. You can call it a quantum computer without being a heretic, as long as you understand that God himself created the reality and how it is constructed, how it operates. And what man is doing is just realizing through experimentation what the arrangement is, what the construct is, and what the components are. They're simply observing God's handiwork. So go ahead, my friend.
That's exactly it, and we've compared it to back engineering before. And when you see what's going on at CERN, that's exactly what they're doing, because they're looking down at the quantum scale to see the arrangement and the spin of these particles. And then you've got D-Wave. They're using these algorithms and the qubits going to other dimensions, doing all their freaky, deaky stuff that they get up to. And that's another aspect of it as well. It's all back engineering in an attempt to recreate their own vision of it, like a mirror version. You can't improve on it. And like you said, Tony, it's always, even as a young guy, I mean, when I was thinking, we've all been there. How did we get here? What's it all about? And there had to be something or someone that set all of this in motion. And I always kind of refer it to, I mean, I'm not saying we're in the simulation, but say somebody said that to me, I would say to them, well, who wrote the program? There's got to be a creator.
There has to be a starting point. Let's take it from a different but connected, direction. DNA. You cannot create life. You can reproduce it. You can rearrange the quantum particles that result in DNA. You can do, as one of my articles in our new magazine that I haven't even said to anybody about. We'll talk about that in a second. But the construct of DNA from the quantum level, from the primordial particles that CERN is looking at, that D-Wave looks at and D-Wave is using. You can start with the primordial particles and you can build DNA in a computer. You can model it. One of my articles in our new e-magazine, it goes by the name of Entangled. The article is in silico DNA. That means in silicon, in the computer chip, modeling your DNA, because it's been sequenced. It's been reduced to zeros and ones. And you can use that pattern in the computer to model whatever life form you want. But you've got to have a starting point. You're right, Kev. You have to have a programmer. It's like the old saying. Yeah, you can take the dirt and you can create whatever you want, whatever life form you want to create from that dirt. But who made the dirt?
That's a very good point.
So, if we're talking about constructing things, you have to have a starting point, whether you're talking about building a sentient word simulation or you're building DNA. You have to have a starting point. And that comes from God the Creator, and there's nobody that's been able to prove otherwise. I don't care who they are. You cannot prove that God does not exist, and you cannot prove that God is not the Creator. Now, the people can argue with me all they want, but, I'm sticking with it. So I'm going to use that opportunity to read a piece of Scripture today before we run out of time. I've only got about a minute. So I'm only going to read a couple of lines, and then maybe I'll read a little bit more later on. But we're all coming up on the break here real quick. Psalm 91. If you guys want to refer to Psalm 91 during the break. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Surely He will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and rampart. You will not have fear. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. And we'll pick it up on the other side.
Is Truth Frequency Radio.
No hate, no hype, no fear. Real people, real radio.
Welcome back, all you strangelets out there. Thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's Anthony Patch Show with Anthony Patch and myself, Kev Baker. And don't forget, check out Anthony's work over at anthonypatch.com. And it gives me great pleasure to announce that we are going to be releasing, at long last, after us teasing you with this for a while now, an e-magazine that goes by the name of Entangled. Now, it's all come together. There's a few of us collaborating. Tony is the main editor-in-chief of this. But the first edition is going to be a CERN special edition. Just to give you a taste of some of the articles in there. Tony's contributed, I think it's 7 or 8. CERN, Absolute Existential Threat. An amazing article, so in-depth, you're going to love that. Strangelets, Confirmed. Necromancy. Sentient Quantum Biology. And then we move on to somebody going by the name of Kev Baker. And I've wrote an article called Spooky Action at a Distance Isn't the Strangest Aspect of Our Quantum World. It's a bit of a mouthful, and it was meant to be just a little kind of introductory article. It turned into some behemoth essay, Tony. It looks the part, though, and I'm sure the listeners and the readers of this...
it's beautiful. You put together a beautiful article.
Well, it shows, it gives a kind of insight into what got me into this quantum physics, and it's just so fascinating. We've also got CERN's brain, quantum neuroscience, and it's not just us two, Tony. There's a lot of people coming together on this, and I think it was Chris put this together, right?
Yeah, Chris from End Times Matrix News did all of the layout. She did all of the graphics except the ones like you have embedded in your article itself. And we also have one of our listeners who's in chat all the time with us, right? Drum roll, Rebecca. Rebecca J. Gray. She has listed some beautiful pieces of scripture in there for us, and you'll get a chance to see her image in our magazine as well. And then Lynn Liaz. Yes, the famous Lynn Liaz from YouTube land, one of the biggest channels out there. Great Christian channel. She has provided an excellent article and a link to one of her latest videos with a great message in there. And this is just to give you an example of what we're going to do. It's only the first issue. We are inviting other people to be contributing authors, writers, reporters to the magazine. And we also have Robbie has contributed an article by the title of Imagination. So we have a well-rounded group of contributors in this very first issue. I'd ask you to go to anthonypatch.com. You'll see it front and center on the homepage. If you just subscribe for a year or purchase an individual copy each month, they will be published on the first of each month. It's live right now. It's available, but we're doing kind of a manual process here. So if you'll give us just a little bit of time when you order, within about 30 minutes, I personally will email to you the link and password to the e-magazine itself. We're still having software issues as far as a shopping cart to do this as an automatic download at the time that you purchase. But if you just go right ahead and give us a little bit of time, I personally will send you a note and a link and a password to the magazine. So we're real happy with how it came together. Chris is an artist, truthfully, quite literally. She is a great graphics artist and put this together for all of our benefit. It's 43 pages, and I think it's informative. And we will continue to build and expand, and it will be even more interactive as we get going with this. We already have a live link, as I said, to one of Lynn's videos, but the rest of us will start doing that as well. It's just some teething issues. So go ahead, Kev.
You know, I'm going to rope Whistles into that as well, because as you know, he writes his own music and things, Tony, and he's quite gifted a writer, so he could even write some poetry for us, and I know then that's going to attract the cult of Whistles. The guy has got a fan club around the world, Tony. He's a living legend, man.
Yeah, of course he is. I mean, he's talented and he's smart and he's a funny guy. I mean, he's well-rounded. So that's what you're going to see. That's an example. We're going to bring in a lot of, oh gosh, should I even use the word diversity? Oh, man.
And we are so entangled. I'm sitting here going, no, it's the perfect word, but really in this current climate, they've hijacked that word, dude. It's a good word. They've weaponized it, man. Bring us back that word. No.
Okay. They've weaponized it. Yeah. But it is. Again, the reason it's called Entangled is because you guys in the audience, you know that Kev and I we really are, like his wife says, we're spooky. And it happens with me and Chris. It happens with me and Lynn Leoz. I think even Rebecca and I have experienced it. Robbie and his wife Cheryl, we have personally also experienced quantum entanglement. And what I want to say is it's like we're doing the same things at the same time without communicating to each other. That's our version of quantum entanglement. But Kev explains that in the article, and that's why we call it Entangled, is because really the people that are coming together in this magazine all have their own perspectives, all have their own talents, and they contribute those without my input. I'm not in control of this. Yes, I edit just for continuity, but I'm not in control of it.
And us and our audience, it's almost like we make up the individual components of the BOLTZMANN or the BOLTZMANN machine, because it's like we're all the individual qubits and we're all looking at the entire picture, every solution, every problem all at once and trying to extrapolate from that some kind of answer. So in a way, we're almost like a living representation of what we're talking about.
You know, I think that's beautiful. Yeah, we're kind of standing in the middle of my 600 cell tetrahedron and we're looking around at all these dots, which are all the wonderful people that do their own critical thinking, do their own research, have their own contributions to make to the audience. So it's an extension of what we're doing here on the radio. It gives us an opportunity to go into more detail on subjects that we cover here on the air, and it gives us an opportunity to I think, broadcast to you other people's voices. So view it as a way for these writers, these contributors that don't have a YouTube channel or don't have a radio blog talk show, to have a voice to an audience that we are hopefully pulling together in a large fashion. We really want this to grow so that there is that opportunity for other people to become entangled with all of these diverse subjects that people have researched for years on their own. So that's the mission statement, if you will.
And you know, it's like when you hear the truth, you start to resonate with it. It's almost like your spin is realigned, Tony. We'll keep this quantum analogy going. And much like they're wanting to rearrange the spin of our tubulin dimers in there, it's the way we align. And that's why our entanglements, I think, form with some and not others, because we do hit that kind of vein of truth that's relevant to us. I mean, not everybody is into this stuff. I get that. Everyone's got their own kind of niche kind of information and research they get into. But when you are into something and you hear something that's right, you just feel a connection with that.
Yeah, we are pointing in similar directions. I think we are trying as a group, the authors here as well as the ones that will come together in subsequent issues, we're trying to go to the positive. Yeah, we're warning people and we're putting out all these, evil agendas. But really, what we're doing is trying to be encouraging to people and to take away that fear factor by providing you detailed information, but also inspirational information that will hopefully offset the things in our reality that are negative, that do drag us down. And that quantum entanglement comes from that same similar direction that all of us as contributors are going with our messages. We're all pointing in the positive spin direction. We are aligning ourselves in a positive way. Now, I sound very new agey by saying that, but
again, that's because they hijacked the language. Again, the pesky new agers, they've hijacked good terminology because let's stick again. You mentioned the whole universe being like a quantum computer, micro, macro, right down to us ourselves being quantum computers in our minds, all entangled together, entangled with everything, Tony.
Yeah, everything is connected, and that's just proven out, in basic quantum mechanics and particle physics, and even in quantum computing, because it shares that environment. That doesn't mean that you cannot have a spiritual relationship with this model. You can't separate the physical from the spiritual. Now, my good friend Lynn just did a couple of videos. In fact, her last video she posted, I think it was yesterday, is about the spiritual battle, but also how it's ramping up. So I'm going to go back while I have some time here. I want to take the fear factor away. We're talking about terror, and we were talking about in this Psalm 91 scripture, and I'm going to continue just very, very quickly. I'm going to speed read, okay? Back up just one or two lines here. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only observe with your eyes and see the punishment of the wicked. If you say, the Lord is my refuge, and you make the Most High your dwelling, no harm will overtake you. No disaster will come near your tent. For he will command his angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. They will lift you up in their hands so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent. Because he loves me, says the Lord, I will rescue him. I will protect him, for he acknowledges my name. He will call on me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. And that is what this is all about. Everything that we talk about, the reason we talk about, the reason we put together Entangled magazine, all of these things is for the purpose of salvation. It is for the purpose of coming to the Lord. It is for coming to the understanding that salvation is from one source, and that is Jesus Christ. And because of the sacrifice, it is about our admission of sin, our repentance for sin, our coming to him on bended knee of repentance, and asking for that salvation, and asking to be indwelt by the Holy Spirit, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Because that is the true salvation that provides you that full armor of God in the face of everything that we're seeing going on here. And as my friend Lynn said in her last video about spiritual warfare, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. We wrestle against principalities in the air, against evil. Our modern society wants to disavow any relevance of the spiritual world, that, this whole talk of evil spirits and demons coming through portals, all of this is nonsense. That's what they think. That's what they want to default to. However, the reality is there's an awful lot more going on in the spiritual realm than we are aware of as human beings, and a lot more going on in that realm than in the physical. You can't separate the two, but the spiritual realm is vastly larger and different from the realm that we experience in this reality. Their goal through the worship of Lucifer is to change our reality to the reality that Lucifer wants. He's trying to sidestep judgment. He is trying, I should be more specific and say, Satan is trying to avoid judgment because he knows his time is short. So I'm going to wrap up that sermon right there and let you jump back in, Kev, because I could talk for hours on this stuff, and that's not why people are here. They're not here to hear me talk forever. So jump in here, my friend.
Well, I'm not sure, because I'm sure the audience out there would absolutely hang off your every word, Tony, and very well said there. But I remember one of the emails that we shared during the week, and I don't know if you want to shift gears here or not, but I found it really cool. And it was to do with space propulsion. Now, we talk electric universe and stuff like that, and I was showing you this new plasma kind of idea that they've got for getting us into the lower atmosphere. Now, bearing in mind we do talk electric universe, and I'm a big fanboy of Elon Musk, right? Is there no way that he could be like speeding up his journey to Mars and things so we could get him up to his colony sooner?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, in the past, there's been a lot of research and development on ion drive, and this is very similar to that. And plasma is really just a very simplified fashion of using the ether. This is an extension, again, of Tesla's research. None of this is really new. The plasma is an inexhaustible supply. Go back to what I said a little bit ago about the Sapphire Project modeling the actual, in the laboratory, the actual processes of the sun, and that is absorbing energy in the form of plasma, ionized gas, into the sun so that it then produces the energy that we see, the accelerated particles that strike our Earth, the electrons, the photons, all the way down the line. The plasma drive is doing the same thing as the sun. It's absorbing, or it can be if they do it properly, rather than having a fuel tank and a rocket engine. They can actually, if they do this correctly, is intake the plasma, just like a jet engine intakes, the atmosphere, the oxygen, so to speak. You can intake the plasma and you can accelerate it out the other end. Basic, opposite reaction. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. But they're trying to say that they can drive without this opposite reaction, which I disagree with. But anyway, go ahead.
No, it's just fascinating listening to you talking about that, because you know me, my mind's usually up there in space and things like that. And when you'd kind of shared those emails, it just got me thinking, and it just begs the question, really, doesn't it? Why we haven't been using this stuff. Like you say, they've always known about it, and why it's only now that they're starting to even talk about this stuff, Tony.
Well, going back to your conjecture about Elon Musk and getting to Mars sooner, if the planet is facing judgment from God, if the planet is facing not this time a flood, but fire, which will, according to Scripture, burn even the elements, okay? If your deep underground military base is not a viable solution to that scenario, then you escape the planet and you head out there in your little plasma drive spaceship. Maybe that's what they want to do. They want to avoid the judgment taking place on Earth by getting off Earth. I don't know. They're crazy.
And that's basically the kind of road that Stephen Hawking goes down, doesn't it? Because he says if we don't start moving off this rock, then we're going to wipe ourselves out.
Well, yeah, he says that, and I'm laughing because I'm thinking of your Photoshop abilities. Him in his wheelchair with a plasma drive hooked up to the back end of it.
We could have him around the dark side of the moon.
All right, I have to say this. I'm probably letting the cat out of the bag way too soon. Let me ask the guys in chat. So here it comes, chat room. In the magazine Entangled, what would you think about if we had a comic strip, a graphic novel comic strip in that? And I won't give the whole thing away because it's such a cool idea in its entirety, what I want to do with this comic strip. But what would you think if we had an opportunity to play with some of our characters like Elon and Gordy and Eric and Stephen Hawking and some of the other celebrity physicists that are on TV? Would you like to see a comic strip in our magazine where we get to lampoon these guys? So go ahead and put up your responses in chat. Anyway, Kev.
My answer to that is, oh, yeah.
You got to have a balance to everything. Got to have a balance to it. So we'll see. We'll see what we can put up. If any of you guys out there that are listening out in chat, outside chat, the whole audience is listening. If you want to contact me through my website, there's a contact tab, anthonypatch.com. If you know of anybody who does graphic novel work, comic strips, so to speak, that might want to be our artist, we're looking for an artist to do that. Now, you know what? I bet Robbie Spencer can do it. He's so multi-talented.
If I was to make one up right now, I would be a cartoon of Hillary Clinton's fly over at the G7 meeting over in Sicily. How apt a place to have the world leaders meeting, the home of the mafia. You know, they're going to look right at home walking about down there. It's going to look like something out of The Godfather, isn't it, Tony?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I saw a Photoshop of her. I guess it was the beginning of the campaign season, and she was on a broomstick.
It's very befitting of her. Probably a fully automated one. Probably Elon that programmed it.
Probably. So, hey, when are we going to CERN? When are we going to go to Geneva? I thought Alon and Gordy were taking us to CERN.
I don't know. I'm going to have to check my chronovisor to see when that happens. Don't tell me I've got a chronovisor, Tony. Oh, come on.
I don't know. My Skype just started burping when I said that.
Oh, wow. Either that's like, it doesn't like time travel either. Oh.
No, it doesn't.
No.
But we like to try to have some fun. I think it would be fantastic if, you know, I get the sense that Elon Musk would be more approachable, that he would be a guy who would send his guys to contact us in a good way, reach out to us than, you know, the D-Wave characters.
I'm glad you said that because he does. Yeah. He looks like a cool kind of guy. And I love the fact, I mean, these inventors, I mean, it's a pretty poor comparison, I know, Tony, but he does really, you can compare him to Tesla in a way, only because he's a game changer. Only this one, at least we're listening to this Elon Musk character, unlike Tesla, whose information and breakthroughs were hidden for obvious reasons because, I mean, free energy, that had been a paradigm change that the elite cabal that are still running the world today just wouldn't allow.
Yeah. And I like what Karen Marie just posted. She said, I'm praying for Elon. Hey, we pray for all these guys. They're humans just like us. They're just on the wrong track. Now, before I forget, we announced the Entangled e-magazine. I also need to give you an update about CERN. A couple of days ago, CERN actually began low power, just small numbers of particles, small bunches. CERN began colliding particles at CERN. It's no big deal. We did a show a couple of weeks ago that the Awake Linear Accelerator has been fired up. So everything's functioning at CERN. Don't any of the guys on YouTube say, you know, there's demons coming out and, you know, the world's coming to an end and all that ridiculous nonsense. Nothing is happening at CERN that is going to be disastrous right now. Okay? The portal's not opening right now. Maybe it'll happen later this year. Who knows? I'm not putting dates to anything. But things are coalescing on multiple levels at CERN, politically, militarily, in the cyber world. All of this stuff is pulling together. And don't forget, CERN's calendar is timed to the activities of the Black Pope, the general of the Jesuit Society, of the Vatican. And the Vatican will be, in September, conducting their re-reformation of all the world's religions. The one world religion will be announced in September. So does that coincide with the timetable of what CERN is doing with their particles and their Awake machine? We'll see. But it's very curious how many things are coalescing together.
Absolutely, Tony. And when you talk about CERN there, the way I think about it is when you've got a machine like that, you start off slowly. You don't go full throttle right away. And this is it, just warming back up. Well, not warming up, but they are doing stuff there now. But like Tony says, don't let anyone put fear into you over on YouTube, because we all know there's a lot of hits and clicks and bucks to be made from sensationalizing things like that. It's a big machine. There's a lot to get into, but just keep your heads and just research not only what people on YouTube say, but very much what myself and Anthony Patch say as well, because it's important that you form your own ideas and you fact-checked us, because sometimes we get it wrong, Tony, right?
Sure, we're, prone to error as well, but I will say this on our behalf. If you want to know what's going on at CERN, you'll get the straight facts from here. You will not get sensationalism. You'll not get things that are blown out of, proportion. No fear here. If we are going to conjecture about something, we'll be very specific and say, this is speculation, this is conjecture. But if you see something on YouTube and they say, oh, they're ripping holes in the atmosphere, or they're, got demons coming out and they're changing time, we'll just come over and listen to our show and we'll tell you really what's going on at CERN. Okay?
Stay tuned, folks. We've got Freaky Friday after the break. It's been another amazing Anthony Patch show. Check out his work over at anthonypatch.com. And we'll both be back, same time, same place, next week. Thank you all for tuning in.
Good night.
And on a crystal ball. Now, this Palantir company, this is the one we were talking about the other night, Alex Karp, the CEO, set it up with Peter Thiel, the PayPal guru. And I think, Tony, the two main programs that we covered the other night were Gotham and Metropolis. Now, Gotham is the one that we should all really have some idea about, because it should be familiar to us from Gotham Shield, that drill that everyone was losing their mind about not so long ago. But what else are they running, Tony? Or is that their two main kind of software packages?
Yeah, that's really what in the public domain they're disclosing to us. One, the Gotham is really to bring in databases of information from a variety of intelligence sources and be able to coalesce them into something that they can model, the data, they can look at the patterns, literally in the binary numbers. This is very deep into why D-Wave's quantum computers are used, is because they are modeling the actual geometric configuration that is derived from the ones and zeros in the data streams that they are gathering and bringing together under the Gotham program, so that they can apply it in a command and control fashion, so they can make sense of all of this overload. It's almost like sensory overload. And they have to be able to sift it very quickly. And let's talk about it on a positive note for a moment, rather than just slamming these guys. They are running a counterintelligence operation from all the different countries of the world. Everybody's concerned about personal safety, trying to do something about terrorism. I applaud, and I know you, Kev, you applaud their efforts to keep us safe. We are not working against the intelligence communities here. We are sharing how anything in science can be used for good and it can be used for the nefarious. We tend to share the nefarious because it's occulted, it's hidden from us. And so I just want to say to the intelligence community at large, we're on your side, guys. Okay? You don't need to come kicking Kev's door down and my door down and drag us off. It isn't necessary. We're not a threat to you. And we're not a threat to your operatives. We're not divulging anything that is going to harm the people that are out there gathering the human intelligence that is so necessary, the boots on the ground that are bringing this information to the command and control centers, as was depicted in Saudi Arabia. So,
and Tony, what really frustrates me is, that center in Saudi Arabia is one example, but we know that with the level of surveillance, the sentient world simulation that we always refer to, it's a good example to use. They do know everyone's location. They do know what everyone is up to. And that is why, for me, and we've had a recent example again over here in the UK, that any time any attack or attempted terror event is done, carried out, or is stopped when they're plotting, in the plotting phase of it, we always find out that at one stage they were on the radar. And it's like I was saying to you before the show, this is what really frustrates me, because that means that this machine really is working. It's doing the job it was set up to do. And instead of it protecting us in a real good kind of world, they would go out and arrest these people because they've been flagged. They would realise what they're up to. Somebody takes them off the machine, Tony. Somebody puts them under the radar. And it's almost as if they're just allowed to go about and do their nefarious deeds so that the governments and the dark agents who took them off the machine can go about changing agendas and pushing things forward. That's just the way I see it. And that's why it's so frustrating. That's at 22 lives in Manchester, all those lives, the Coptic Christians today over in Egypt, all that could be saved. That's just two examples.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking to even conjecture that our agencies are perhaps allowing some of these guys to go about their business.
And Tony, I'm with you. I want to echo you as well, because I never made it clear enough that, like you, I support these guys, the good ones. And these people that choose to take up being agents, they obviously love their countries when they have that desire to do that job in the first place. Whatever changes some of them or however they turn them, I don't know. That's that whole compartmentalization thing. I'm not going after the full community, Tony, and I know you share that. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to the Anthony Pat Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network. We're kicking off an absolute marathon of information here on TFR tonight, and I am joined by the man himself, Mr. Anthony Patch. Now, I'm Kev Baker. You catch me on the Kev Baker Show, but tonight I fly as the wingman of Tony. We've got so much great stuff to get into, Tony, and here we are again. Another week just goes by in the bat of an eyelid.
Sure does, and thank you very much for having me here and making all the connections work and making the continuity happen and keep me straight, because I need you. I can't do this show without you, my friend.
You know, it's like I've got the laser guider and I've got it on the target, and you just home straight in on it, Tony, and boom, we just all come together, everything good. And the audience is growing nicely out there. They're all tuning in tonight to hear their favourite strange quarks, Mr. Patch and Mr. Baker. Or is it Dr. Patch and Dr. Baker?
Oh, yeah. You remember a couple of weeks ago, you're right. Thanks for the reminder. We are doctors. Thank you, AI. You must recognize us as Dr. Baker and Dr. Patch.
So, Tony, where would we like to start tonight? We've got a couple of things we want to get into. I'll hand it over to you, man.
Well, I want to compliment you on the title of tonight's show, and that is Getting into the Nuts and BOLTZMANN. And BOLTZMANN refers to a computer we talked about on your show on Wednesday. Go ahead, sir.
I know I shouldn't say it, but even I like that one. That's a good one.
Well, and I love your crystal brain. You have the diamond brain. That's fabulous. You really are an excellent graphic artist.
You know how long that took, Tony? I done that in about, 5-10 minutes. Just threw it together. Boom. If I sit and think about it, it just wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work at all.
No, you got to take it right off the top of the head. That was beautiful. Yeah, we went into the BOLTZMANN computer, which is the new generation computer for D-Wave, which I am convinced you and I are the first ones to break this news on Wednesday. And that's because our source is directly from D-Wave in a presentation made at CERN about a week and a half ago. So we are reflecting from the horse's mouth, or from the horse's other end. Yeah, you and I are both veterans. We understand the enemy. We're not on, the military battlefield, you and I, but you and I are plugged in enough into the internet, into the data stream, if you will, that we understand the threat. We do. Let's just say this, okay? Yeah, we call ourselves doctors, but you made a good point last show, and that is that we are kind of shifting into a position of being commentators. Yes, we do the research. We will bring you the hard nuts and bolts about technology, but it's obvious that our audience wants to hear what we think about events and to comment on those events from, let's call it, a rarefied perspective that you and I have because of how deep we go into this. And we are very much like a data analyst in an intelligence community, because we're taking it in, we're sifting it, and we're trying to make some recommendations to the chain of command. And our chain of command, if you will, is our audience, a very intelligent group of people. Our audience is better informed than I think any other audience out there on the internet doing blog talk radio shows. Otherwise, they wouldn't come here. They would not put up with all of the technical stuff that you and I get into. It's just too much for most people. It goes right over their head. And so I appreciate the fact that we have critical thinkers in the audience. I do want to take questions during the second hour of the show if people want to put them up in chat. But, we are simply serving our audience. I've said this on several shows now, but I really want you guys to understand that we are sincere, that we are doing the data analysis and commentary for your benefit. Okay? So there you go, Kev.
Absolutely. And, we've got a unique way of doing it anyway, Tony, because there we are talking about this horrendous thing that happened in the UK just in the past few days. But we're able to tie in all the technology that we're speaking about in a real world situation. Something that could have been a solution if it had been in the hands of good people.
Yeah, and this anti-terrorism center, as we've sort of euphemistically labeled it in Saudi, I guess you could say, what they're doing with their computer systems, and we related that to the NSA and intelligence communities, GCSQ, their surveillance programs, their surveillance systems, activities in Saudi Arabia with President Trump, the King of Saudi Arabia, and their new counterintelligence operations center where they had their hands placed on the illuminated globe of the world, the sphere, what we are calling the crystal ball, because that is the trademark, that is the symbol of the software company that provides the Gotham software program for this counterintelligence center in Saudi Arabia, produced by a company by the name of Palantir. And we went into, a pretty good overview on the last show, and I think people should really review that if they want the background on it. But we're going to kind of skip beyond that, and we're going to look at the applications. We're going to cite some of the names of some of the other software programs that are being used by the intelligence communities, in particular GCSQ, and we're going to focus on the NSA. All of this is public information. In fact, some of it's even dated information. But we're just going to give you a flavor of when we and other people in the truth community talk about, surveillance, and they're recording all of our conversations on our cell phones and landlines, and all of our emails are being intercepted. We're going to give you some of, perhaps even some old names, the guys in the intelligence community that are listening to us right now. I'm sure you'll get a good laugh out of the names that we're going to present tonight. So none of it's secret. None of it's revolutionary. It just gives you a tangible reference point that it really is going on, this surveillance state. So take it away, Kev.
No, I agree with you. And it's funny how all this came about, because it all connects together. And this line of research that we're on, it was almost handed to us on a plate by the guys at D-Wave who were in that video presentation we watched, because towards the end, like we covered the other night, they started talking about quantum cloud-based access and stuff like that, and the software attached to it. And that is what led us to this Palantir right at the same time as Donald Trump is standing with his hand